The scream started around 3:12 a.m., when the last drop of water drained from the HOA's prized irrigation system. Sprinklers wheezed like dying lungs. Faucets choked and sputtered. Toilets gurgled like a drowning man's final breath. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood was waterless, panicked, and pounding on HOA President Karen's door. And where was I? I was sipping coffee on the dock of my lake cabin, watching my private reservoir glitter under the sun like a loaded gun, while the people who tried to ruin me were dying of thirst in designer bathrobes. They sent HOA cops to my land 8 times. Now they couldn't even flush. You ever wonder what happens when the HOA bullies the one person who controls the thing they need most? It started with a clipboard and a smug knock on the door. I was out back, casting a lazy line into the water, watching morning mist slither across the lake like a ghost that hadn't decided whether to haunt or vanish. This cabin wasn't just a getaway. It was my place, my sanctuary. 50 acres of unspoiled pine-draped elevation that dipped down into the cleanest spring-fed lake in 3 counties. I bought it 15 years ago, fair and square, including the entire watershed and surrounding aquifer beneath it. A private slice of American peace. No neighbors, no traffic, no rules. Just loons, fish, and the occasional deer with a death wish. So when I heard the knock, 2 sharp raps, followed by an assertive third, I figured it had to be a lost hiker, or maybe a UPS guy with the wrong GPS coordinates. What I didn't expect was a man in a knockoff tactical vest, mirrored sunglasses, and a security badge that looked like it came from a Spirit Halloween bin. His shirt said, OA Enforcement Unit. His chest puffed out like he was the sheriff of Deadwood. "Good morning," he barked without making eye contact. "Are you aware this property is currently under review by the Homeowners Association for compliance violations?" I blinked. "Come again?" He flipped open the clipboard with theatrical flair. "As of this morning, the HOA has received multiple reports of code violations concerning unregistered shoreline structures, unauthorized vehicle storage, and potential non-compliance with community aesthetics." I stood there, wet fishing line dripping onto my deck, too stunned to laugh. "You do realize this isn't part of your HOA?" I asked. "Not even close. My property line is 5 miles past your association boundary. You're on private land, and you're trespassing." He smiled like a man who knew something I didn't. The HOA recently passed a new territorial resolution, expanding jurisdiction to include bordering parcels that may impact shared community viewsheds or property values. Your land falls under visual influence. That gives us access. I almost dropped the fishing rod. "Visual influence?" "Correct," he said, as if that settled everything. "Page 3 of our revised charter. Karen Witherspoon signed it into effect last month. I'm going to need to issue a preliminary citation for the unauthorized dock structure. You can appeal it at next month's compliance review panel, provided you qualify as a recognized member." I didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at him until he started shifting uncomfortably. "You have 60 seconds to get off my land," I said quietly. "You're not real law enforcement. You're not invited. And you're about to see what happens when you try to police someone who doesn't answer to you." His eyes flicked toward the woods behind him, where I now noticed 2 other men in matching outfits holding cameras and walkie-talkies like they were prepping to film an episode of Cops. He didn't argue, just wrote something on his clipboard and walked off, muttering about non-cooperative threats and emergency jurisdiction escalation protocols. That was the first visit. The next 7 got worse. By week 2, I started finding laminated violation notices zip-tied to trees at the edge of my property. The second visit, they left a bright orange sticker on my dock, citing me for non-regulation ladder design and visual obstructions to HOA members engaged in recreational kayaking. I don't know what made me angrier, the sticker, or the idea that Karen and her cronies thought they could dictate what kind of ladder I used on my private lake. That same day, one of my friends drove in to help me install a new water pump and found the access road partially blocked by orange cones and a cheap metal sign that read, "Private access HOA members only." The sign wasn't even facing the right Direction. When we moved the cones, one of Karen's goons appeared from behind a pine tree with a body cam and started filming us like we were breaking into Fort Knox. This area is being monitored for illegal vehicle trespass, he warned. Please state your name and business for the record. Buddy, I said, gripping the post of the fake sign. You have about 3 seconds before this thing becomes firewood. He didn't flinch. Just stared through the lenses of his mirrored glasses like he was waiting for backup that wasn't coming. That was the third visit. Visit 4 included a drone. No joke. I was shirtless, hammering shingles onto the guest shed roof when I heard the buzz, looked up and saw a black quadcopter circling like a vulture with a badge. It dipped down, scanned the deck, hovered near my new rain collection barrels, and then zipped away toward the HOA development 3 hills over. I thought about shooting it down. The only reason I didn't was because I knew I'd need that drone as evidence later. Sure enough, 3 hours later, I got a notice taped to my gate. Unauthorized water containment structures may pose ecological threat. Cease and desist or face legal action. There was no signature, just a printed name. OA President Karen W. That night I sat on the porch, whiskey in hand, staring across the lake and wondering what kind of narcissistic tyrant needed to control things she couldn't even see from her house without binoculars. I thought that would be the end of it. But no. They were just warming up. Visit 5 happened during a rainstorm. I caught them, 3 officers in reflective vests, walking along my shoreline with a measuring wheel and a GoPro. One of them slipped in the mud and nearly face-planted into the water. I watched from my deck with binoculars, not saying a word. I knew better by then than to engage. Let the cameras record them trespassing. Let their own footage bury them. When they left, they dropped a soggy envelope in my mailbox. A multi-page document full of red ink, diagrams, and highlighted sections of HOA policy about water access setbacks and conformity to community aquatic safety standards. I laughed so hard I nearly fell off the porch. None of it applied. Not 1 square inch of my property fell within their jurisdiction. But Karen didn't care. That was the point. She wasn't enforcing rules. She was manufacturing a war. Visit 6 came with a printed map. It was attached to my dock in a plastic sleeve, labeled Preliminary Shoreline Reclamation Proposal. It showed a dotted line carving through the southeast corner of my property, extending 20 feet into my lake, and marked Designated Community Waterfront Buffer Zone. They were trying to steal part of my shoreline. The accompanying letter said, "We appreciate your cooperation as the HOA works to expand equitable water access to all paying members. Non-compliance may result in legal injunction." I stood there in the rain, holding that paper in one hand and gripping the dock railing with the other so hard I heard the wood crack. That's when I stopped laughing. Visit 7 included a uniformed man with a taser. Not a cop, not even close, just a rent. A cop in HOA-branded tactical gear. He stood at the edge of my property, hand on his belt, while another guy filmed me with a smartphone. "We're conducting a safety sweep," he said, glancing around like he expected a bear to jump out and confirm his importance. "There have been reports of unsafe shoreline behavior, including aggressive signage and hostile posturing by the landowner." I didn't say a word, just took out my phone and began filming them. The security guy squinted at me, then spoke louder. "You are now being officially documented for obstruction of community governance under HOA Code 5C. I held my phone steady and responded in a calm, level voice. "This is private property. You're trespassing. Leave now or I'll press charges." They left, but not before stapling another notice to the tree near my driveway. Ongoing non-compliance investigation pending. And then came Visit 8, the one that lit the match. Karen didn't send the clipboard brigade this time. She came herself. She rolled up in a pearl white Mercedes SUV with custom license plates that read QWNKRN. She brought a folding chair, planted it in my gravel driveway like she was waiting for a front row show, and proceeded to live stream herself from her phone, narrating my refusal to cooperate with equitable water sharing. I was trimming backbrush near the shoreline when I heard her voice drifting through the trees. I walked up slowly, She turned the camera to me and smiled like a python in pearls. Here he is, the non-compliant squatter who's hoarding natural resources from tax-paying citizens. I stopped 6 feet from her, not blinking. Leave. You don't own this lake, she said. This body of water has been reclassified under the HOA's Shared Resource Inclusion Plan. That's not a real document, I said. That's a fantasy you printed at Kinko's. She stood up, eyes flashing. This shoreline is now part of the Community Waterfront Overlay. You'll receive notice of intent to annex in the mail. If you resist, we'll file for immediate enforcement under emergency water redistribution statutes. I stared at her. I couldn't even speak. She actually believed the words coming out of her mouth. You have no jurisdiction here, I finally said. No legal standing. No rights. This land is deeded, surveyed, and protected. You're not expanding your HOA. You're trespassing. And the next time one of your fake cops steps onto my shoreline, I won't call my lawyer. I'll call the state. She didn't flinch, just smiled wider, like I'd confirmed her delusion. We'll see you in court then, she said. The community is watching, and you're on the wrong side of water rights history. With that, she folded her chair, climbed into her car, and drove off. Her tires spun gravel as she vanished down the mountain road, leaving behind a trail of arrogance, entitlement, and something else I hadn't seen before: desperation. I stood there in the dust, staring at the faint ripples on my lake, and realized something chilling. She wasn't just bluffing. She truly thought she could take what wasn't hers. That's when I stopped reacting and started planning. Karen thought she'd poked a bear. What she didn't realize was that she had stepped on a landmine buried beneath the water her entire neighborhood couldn't live without. After her 8th and most outrageous visit, after she stood on my driveway and declared my shoreline subject to community annexation, I walked straight into the cabin, poured myself a glass of water from the tap, and opened the reinforced file cabinet in my den. 3rd drawer down, locked twice over. Inside were 2 things: a decades-old leather folder with the original land and aquifer deeds, and a matte black USB stick engraved with the emblem of the Western Watershed Resource Board. Most people don't know what that is. Karen certainly didn't, but I do, because I'm its chairman. I've been running it for 15 years. The land she tried to claim isn't just mine. The lake she wants to turn into shared recreational access isn't just a pond behind a cabin. It's the primary source for the subterranean aquifer that feeds the entire valley's water infrastructure, including her HOA's wells, irrigation systems, and municipal connections. They get water from me. Quietly, legally, permanently. The pipeline they depend on begins 100 feet beneath my kitchen floor. Every time they flush, shower, or fill a pool, that flow starts with my signature. I own it, regulate it, monitor its purity. I don't just live on this land. I supply life to theirs. And Karen, in her weaponized ignorance, just made the mistake of trying to publicly humiliate the one man who could end her entire suburban empire with a single motion passed through the board-eye chair. She has no idea who I am. She thinks I'm just some reclusive old-timer with a beard and a pickup truck. But I didn't get this job because I like trees and fish. I got it because I understand systems. Hydrological systems, bureaucratic systems, legal systems. And now I was going to make that system work against her. The first move was surveillance. Not intimidation, not confrontation, documentation. Because if there's one thing HOA tyrants hate more than losing, it's having their losses recorded and time-stamped. I installed 2 new trail cams, one on the east ridge, where their little drone had been flying, and another facing the dock, camouflaged beneath the overhang. High-res, night vision, remote backup. I adjusted my driveway camera to capture wider angles and extended my property line motion sensors by 20 feet. I wasn't just protecting my land. I was building a case, a living record. A trap that Karen would walk into with a Facebook live stream and a criminal smile. Then I opened the safe and pulled out the original easement maps from the Watershed Authority. Every legal boundary, every line of jurisdiction. I scanned and digitized them. My attorney would need them soon, because Karen wasn't going to stop. Not now that she'd tasted the high of invented power. Sure enough, 2 days later, I received a letter, certified, delivered not through USPS, but by one of her flunkies in an HOA enforcement polo who left it taped to my cabin door. Notice of non-compliance escalation, it read. You are hereby instructed to appear at a mandatory hearing before the Homeowners Association's Compliance Tribunal regarding multiple code violations, including environmental obstruction, viewscape pollution, and failure to recognize jurisdictional integration under the expanded waterfront agreement. There was a seal at the bottom, not from a government entity, from Karen's vanity-printed stationery line, complete with a fake Latin motto that translated to something like order, unity, harmony. I laughed so hard I nearly tore the paper in half. That night, I scanned the letter, annotated it with a note for my lawyer, and uploaded it to our secure legal portal. Then I did something else, something I knew would eventually rip the legs out from under Karen's entire neighborhood. I filed a formal review with the State Utility Commission citing abuse of access privileges, public safety concerns, and potential tampering with water quality monitoring equipment. Because here's the thing Karen didn't know. When you harass the guy who owns your water supply, he doesn't just shut the tap. He calls the people who control the pipes. But Karen wasn't just content to trespass. She wanted spectacle. A week after her last visit, I saw something new online. Videos uploaded to the HOA's official website, featuring Karen narrating drone footage of my property. This individual, she said with the smug confidence of a woman who thinks owning a clipboard grants constitutional power, has refused every opportunity to integrate peacefully with the surrounding community. His hoarding of natural resources and continued environmental aggression are a threat to neighborhood cohesion. The video showed slow pans of my cabin, my dock, and my barrels, all legal, all private, all being portrayed as criminal. She labeled my compost bin a biohazard. She circled my solar panels and accused them of reflective violence. She showed my rain catchment barrels and called them illegal aquifer redirection devices. I couldn't believe it. She wasn't just bluffing anymore. She was building a narrative, turning her own neighbors into a mob by spinning the most self-sufficient man in the county into a villain. I clicked through the comments and saw dozens of messages supporting her. That guy's been weird since the beginning. He's probably draining the lake to build a private moat. If he won't share the water, maybe we should just take it. That's when I stopped smiling. Because I've seen mobs before. I've seen what happens when people rally behind the wrong leader with the right pitch. Karen was stirring the pot on purpose. She didn't want compliance. She wanted confrontation. She wanted me to snap, to yell, to threaten, to give her a clean-cut villain for her HOA's narrative machine. What she didn't realize was that I don't yell, I don't threaten, I file. I counter-surveil, I weaponize bureaucracy the way some people use bear spray. And so I did. I met with my legal team. Yes, I have one. A good one. 3 lawyers, 2 paralegals, and a land use specialist who once testified in front of Congress about rural water rights. We reviewed every inch of footage, every fake citation, every inch of fabricated maps. We began compiling a formal dossier to present to the State Attorney General's office. The charges were stacking up: trespassing, harassment, false impersonation of a public officer, unauthorized surveillance, intentional misrepresentation of legal boundaries. And because Karen couldn't resist, environmental manipulation via distributed misinformation campaigns, I wasn't just preparing a lawsuit, I was preparing a takedown. One Karen wouldn't see coming until the courtroom doors shut behind her. In the meantime, her patrols got bolder. Now they showed up in pairs, sometimes in groups of 3. They'd stand just past my gate, staring, filming, scribbling in notebooks like they were going to submit reports to some imaginary tribunal in the clouds. One of them even started flying a little helicopter drone over my lake, dropping what looked like tiny floating sensors. I collected them with a kayak, opened one, and found a homemade water testing strip glued to a plastic capsule with H2O reclamation pilot written in Sharpie. She was pretending to conduct scientific monitoring. That crossed a line. Not just legal, biological. If that capsule had leaked anything, it could have contaminated my entire system. So, I logged the evidence, photographed everything, called in an independent environmental chemist to verify contamination status. Spoiler alert, it tested clean, but the attempt was enough. My legal team was giddy. Karen had gone from annoying to indictable. She wasn't done. The next escalation came by way of a public HOA meeting streamed on Facebook Live. Karen stood at the front of a gymnasium filled with folding chairs and angry retirees. Her PowerPoint presentation was titled, "Securing Community Resources, Confronting the Water Hoarder." I watched it all. Slide after slide of distorted photos of my property, made-up violations, invented maps. She claimed I had diverted natural runoff away from the neighborhood's shared watershed, a complete fabrication, considering I owned the watershed. She claimed my barrels were illegally capturing rain that belonged to the collective hydrological table. I couldn't make this up if I tried. At one point, she showed a blurry still of me on my dock, waving off a drone, and called me an armed recluse with extremist tendencies. I was holding a garden rake. A man in the audience actually stood up and yelled, "Let's march on him!" That's when I pressed pause. That's when I knew it was time to move to phase 2. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I called a meeting with the water board and laid out everything. The drone flights, the fake patrols, the fabricated annexation claims, the online propaganda. When I was done, the room was dead quiet. These weren't HOA moms and dads. These were lawyers, hydrologists, city officials, and state regulators who'd spent careers keeping water flowing to communities that didn't know how much work went on behind the curtain. And they were pissed. "She's threatening water stability," one of them said, weaponizing public paranoia to pressure infrastructure decisions. "This is federal territory." Another added, "If she keeps escalating, we may need to refer this to the EPA." I just sat there, calm as a still lake. "Let her keep going," I said. "Every word she says is another nail in her coffin. Just make sure the cameras are rolling." Because Karen thought this was about fences, docks, and lakefront control, she had no idea she was about to pick a fight with the man who signs the paperwork that makes her showers warm, her faucets flow, and her little backyard HOA paradise possible. She didn't just harass the wrong guy. She declared war on the very resource her empire needed to survive. And now, it was my turn to let her know just how dry things were about to get. It started on a Tuesday. No warning, no public announcement, no explanation, just silence where water used to be. The first calls probably went out around 6:45 a.m., when suburban showers sputtered into hissing air and shaving cream dried like concrete on HOA member cheeks. Someone flushed a toilet in lot 118 and heard it gurgle like a drowning animal. Kids brushing their teeth spit foam into bone-dry sinks. Pool pumps clicked uselessly, airlocked, their motors wheezing against chlorinated futility. By 7:15 a.m., the neighborhood group chat was flooded, not with water, but panic. "Does anyone else not have pressure? My sprinklers didn't turn on this morning. I think the timers failed. Toilet water is brown. Is this a pipe break?" Karen was still asleep, of course. Her post started around 8:00, polished, poised. "We are aware of a temporary disruption in water service. Please, remain calm. HOA is contacting the City Utility Board." Only, they weren't, because the City Utility Board had no jurisdiction here. The water didn't come from them. It came from me. At 8:13 a.m., my computer pinged. A request for emergency access was filed to the watershed system from the HOA server IP, denied. At 8:15, Karen herself tried my private contact line. It didn't ring. I'd already rerouted her number to voicemail hell. At 8:27, her SUV came roaring up the outer road leading to my gate. She honked 3 times like she was summoning a valet, then stormed out in a silk blouse and 6-inch heels, waving a stack of paper like it had any power here. "Open the damn gate," she screeched at my security camera. This is a felony-level obstruction. People are suffering. I didn't reply. Just sipped my coffee and let the automated system record her every word. Because Karen had finally stepped into the trap she'd built for herself. I hadn't cut them off out of spite. I hadn't even used her name in the work order. I'd simply filed a standard maintenance pause to the watershed district, citing overuse, contamination threats, and unauthorized third-party water testing activities on the private reservoir. Under federal guidelines and board protocols, I had the legal right to halt all distribution from my source for up to 72 hours if abuse could be demonstrated. And oh boy, did I have receipts. Every drone, every fake sensor, every trespass logged. Karen's campaign of HOA supremacy had been neatly bundled into a document package labeled Exhibit D, Resource Manipulation and Hostile Monitoring Attempts. I submitted it at 7:00 a.m. sharp, 30 minutes before the faucets in Karen's house gave their last gasp. The regional board reviewed it and approved the temporary suspension. No hearing needed, no debate, just signatures. Ink on paper. That's all it took to starve an empire. By noon, panic had fermented into chaos. The community pool was closed. Not just closed, green. The filtration system had failed by midday, and without circulation, the chlorine evaporated under the spring sun. Algae bloomed like warfare. Mothers screamed as their toddlers emerged from the shallow end with slimy film clinging to their swimsuits. Lawn care companies packed up and left, unable to run irrigation hoses. The prized HOA landscaping, the same manicured front yards Karen once fined people for improperly edging, began to brown around the edges. Local pets whined as their bowls sat empty, their owners waiting for gallon jugs from Costco to be restocked. One family tried to collect rainwater in a kiddie pool. Karen had fined that same family 6 months earlier for unsightly container placement. Now she was the one buying water by the case and rationing flushes. The real shift came at dusk. That's when the toilets started backing up. Low-flow systems are great for conservation, but they rely on consistent pressure. No water in meant no water out. The smell hit first, then the bubbling, then the silence, house by house, as residents finally realized this wasn't a temporary glitch. This was something else, something bigger, something personal. A meeting was called that night. Emergency HOA quorum. Karen sat at the head of a long plastic table in the clubhouse. Her pearls swapped for panic, her confidence cracked. The live stream of that meeting was everything I'd hoped for. Residents shouting, demands hurled. One man from lot 209 pointed his finger at Karen and screamed, "You said you had it handled. My wife hasn't showered in 2 days." A woman burst into tears on camera. "My mother's on dialysis. We need running water for her equipment." Karen tried to remain composed. "We're looking into the issue," she said through clenched teeth. "There's a temporary service interruption that should resolve soon." But someone had already done their homework. A retired real estate attorney pulled out a manila folder and stood up like he was in a courtroom. "There is no city water connection here," he declared. "This entire HOA was built on a private utility contract through the Western Watershed Resource Board. And the supplier of that water," he turned to the camera, "is the man Karen Witherspoon has been publicly antagonizing for 6 months. We don't have a leak. We don't have a broken pipe. We have a war." At 7:00 the next morning, a sleek black SUV showed up outside my property. Not Karen's this time. A man in a sharp suit got out, flanked by 2 younger interns holding briefcases. He approached the gate calmly, spoke into the intercom with a tone reserved for bank CEOs and federal judges. "Mr. Maddox, I represent the Homeowners Association of Pine Ridge Estates. My client is requesting an emergency mediation regarding the current water situation. We're prepared to offer a monetary settlement in exchange for immediate restoration of service." I watched him from my porch camera. He looked like a man used to winning. A fixer. I didn't answer. Didn't buzz him in. He stood there another full minute before checking his watch and turning to go. One of the interns gave my camera the finger. I smiled. That night, the offer came via email. A scanned letter signed by Karen herself. It was desperate, rambling, full of false humility. We acknowledge there may have been misunderstandings, it read. In the spirit of community unity, we'd like to extend a gesture of reconciliation, a donation to your preferred cause, a public apology, if necessary. Please consider restoring water service before irreversible damage occurs. She attached a screenshot of dying rose bushes, as if I gave a damn. My reply? A single sentence, sent by my attorney. All future communication should be directed to the State Regulatory Board, as the matter is now under review. That was it. I shut the laptop and poured myself a drink. On the dock, the lake rippled like it was laughing. Meanwhile, the neighborhood was unraveling. People were calling the county, the state, the National Guard for all I knew. But the thing is, there's no emergency switch for private water. The law is the law, and the law was on my side. I didn't shut them off permanently. I didn't poison their lines or damage their infrastructure. I just exercised my right to perform immediate and urgent maintenance after discovering a pattern of surveillance, unauthorized testing, and tampering with my property. My report, now filed with the state and backed by legal affidavits, cited potential ecological contamination and coordinated attempts to manipulate pressure flow and public perception. The phrase, sustained harassment against critical infrastructure personnel, was in bold. You'd be surprised how fast government eyes open when someone uses that phrase. Karen doubled down. She tried to play PR savior, posting videos in front of the empty pool with a concerned expression. We're in talks with the water provider, she claimed. We're confident this is just a temporary misunderstanding. The comments turned against her fast. You mean the guy you called a hoarder? Didn't you film his property without permission? I heard he owns everything under us. She started deleting replies. Then she turned off comments entirely. It didn't matter. The narrative was no longer hers. It was mine. By the end of day 3, HOA members were driving to gas stations 15 miles out just to fill up camping jugs. The landscaping crew walked off the job. One guy posted a selfie flipping off Karen's house. Garbage piled up. Tempers flared. At one point, someone tried to fill a kiddie pool with bottled water just to bathe. People were catching rain in trash cans. The same people Karen once fined for gutter runoff violations were now siphoning water from downspouts in the dark. I had seen enough. I filed the final report that night, a 37-page complaint with video, timestamps, sworn testimony, and drone footage, their drone footage, showing illegal trespass, surveillance, and unauthorized use of public resource monitoring devices on private land. I filed it with the State Utility Commission, the Environmental Board, the Water Quality Office, and the Office of the Attorney General. I CC'd every agency that had ever given Karen the time of day, because this wasn't just about water anymore. It was about abuse, entitlement, fraud, and consequences. I didn't restore service the next morning. I waited. Let it simmer. Let the word get around that this wasn't just some grumpy guy with a grudge. This was an official response to a campaign of harassment. Karen's campaign. She had poked the bear, all right. But now the bear had gone to court. And she was about to find out what it feels like when the one thing she can't control stops showing up at her faucet. The courthouse doors opened at 9:03 a.m., but the real reckoning began long before that. I'd been preparing for this moment since the first fake citation appeared on my dock, since the first drone flew over my lake, since Karen Witherspoon stood in my driveway and declared my private shoreline shared community waterfront. What she didn't know was that by the time she started escalating her HOA's war on my land, I'd already begun collecting everything. Every footstep, every lie, every smug live stream she weaponized against me. And now, it was all about to unravel under oath. This wasn't small claims. This wasn't HOA arbitration. This was a state-level civil suit, filed under my name as lead plaintiff and as the acting chairman of the Western Watershed Resource Board, alleging trespassing, impersonation of public officials, harassment, surveillance without consent, environmental interference, and willful endangerment of utility infrastructure. Karen and her HOA board were named personally. Their enforcement officers were named individually. And the complaint was 119 pages long. The courtroom wasn't just a stage, it was an execution chamber dressed in oak and fluorescent light. And Karen was about to be publicly, legally, and financially dismembered. She strutted in like she was still in control. White blazer, gold brooch, a pearl necklace that matched the one she wore when she filmed her water hoarder video on Facebook. She sat at the defense table flanked by two lawyers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. The moment I walked in, her smug expression flickered, just for a second. But it was enough. I nodded to my counsel, Attorney Whitaker Rowe, a man who once made a federal pipeline company cry in open court, and we took our seats. The judge was a no-nonsense veteran of environmental litigation, known for quoting the Clean Water Act like scripture and dismissing fools without ceremony. When he asked if we were ready to proceed, Whitaker stood with the kind of quiet fire that makes grown men nervous. "We are, Your Honor, and we'd like to begin by introducing into evidence Exhibit A, security footage of the defendants conducting armed patrols on land they do not own." The courtroom projector flickered to life. The video began, time-stamped, crystal clear. 3 HOA officers in tactical vests, trudging across my shoreline, one holding a clipboard, one filming, one attempting to hammer a fake restricted access sign into my dock. The sign shattered, they argued. One dropped a water testing capsule into the lake. Another tried to collect soil samples. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the footage continued, documenting intrusion after intrusion. The footage transitioned seamlessly into drone captures. Karen's HOA drone flying over private property, zooming in on windows, hovering over rain barrels. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The judge narrowed his eyes. "Were these individuals licensed law enforcement?" he asked. "No, Your Honor," Whitaker said deadpan. "They were impersonating officers using HOA badges, ordered from a novelty supplier in Arizona. We have the receipts." Exhibit B. A printout was handed up. The vendor's tagline, "Look official without the hassle." The room went still. Then, we hit them with Exhibit C, intercepted emails, obtained legally through a whistleblower on the HOA board, a woman who'd been bullied into silence by Karen until the water outage made her snap. The emails were damning. Karen had written, "We control perception. He can have the land. We'll own the narrative." Another one, "Get the patrols closer to his dock. He'll lash out. Then we nail him with aggression violations." Another, "If he pushes back, we claim mental instability. Nobody trusts a recluse." The judge's lips pressed into a thin line. One of Karen's lawyers actually groaned. But we weren't done. Next came the fabricated citations, Exhibit D. One by one, we displayed them, alongside matching footage showing the exact opposite of what Karen's enforcement claimed. They wrote me up for unregulated chemical storage. The footage showed sealed fertilizer bins within regulation marked and dated. They cited me for aggressive signage. The footage showed a single wooden plaque that read, "No trespassing private property." They accused me of threatening HOA officers. We showed a clip of me calmly filming them while standing 10 feet away, silent, arms crossed. Then Whitaker dropped the hammer. "Your Honor, we are requesting punitive damages on the basis that these were not isolated incidents of ignorance, but a coordinated campaign designed to harass, defame, and provoke a response that would allow the HOA to seize partial control of our clients' land and resources. We have proof of their intent, their actions, and their blatant disregard for the law. What we're asking for is justice." Karen's defense? Laughable. They claimed expanded jurisdiction through adjacent visual zones, which was not just absurd but legally non-existent. They argued that community cohesion required mutual resource sharing. The judge cut them off. "Are you suggesting a private HOA can annex non-member land based on how it looks from a kayak?" the lawyer stammered. Karen tried to speak. The judge shut her down. "Miss Witherspoon, I will hold you in contempt if you speak again without permission. You are not a queen. You are a defendant in a case of serious magnitude." The courtroom stirred. Her composure cracked like porcelain under pressure. But the most brutal moment came when we called the county water engineer to the stand. A calm, bespectacled man who spent his career analyzing regional utility dependencies. Under oath, he testified that Pine Ridge Estates, Karen's precious HOA kingdom, relied entirely on aquifer access from my land. If Mr. Maddox revokes access through a legal process, he said, the HOA will have to spend upwards of $2.7 million to reroute infrastructure or construct a new intake site. There is no viable alternative within a 20-mile radius. Karen's face lost all color. That was the moment it all collapsed. The judge didn't take long. The verdict came the next morning, and the language was surgical. This court finds that the HOA of Pine Ridge Estates, under the leadership of Miss Karen Witherspoon, engaged in a premeditated campaign of harassment, impersonation of authority, and illegal surveillance. The court awards the plaintiff damages in the amount of $1.2 million and issues a permanent injunction against the HOA and its board from conducting any form of enforcement activity beyond their original chartered borders. Then came the death blow. Furthermore, this court refers the matter to the State Attorney General for criminal investigation into impersonation of law enforcement, unauthorized surveillance, and environmental endangerment. Karen was frozen in her chair. One of her officers cried. The others avoided eye contact with the press corps gathering in the hallway. But it wasn't over. Within a week, the State Water Commission launched a full-scale investigation. The EPA got involved. Yes, the EPA, because of the lake capsule incident. Turns out, even floating a fake sensor can be construed as tampering if it's left in a protected watershed. The HOA was placed under administrative review. Karen was removed from the board via emergency vote. A fraud audit revealed she had misappropriated HOA funds to hire her enforcement officers, pay for drone equipment, and print custom signage from out-of-state vendors. Fines piled up. Lawsuits followed. Residents revolted. And then came the foreclosure wave. Here's the twist. Karen had taken out a second mortgage on her home to fund her little campaign, legal fees, propaganda, HOA upgrades. She'd bet it all on the illusion of control, and she lost. Her house hit auction within 90 days. No buyers. Until I showed up. Quiet. Anonymous. Through a trust. Bought it outright. Cash. And then I submitted plans to the county. Public water quality research. Treatment facility expansion. Phase 1. Approved in under 72 hours. The same plot where Karen once filmed her smug HOA livestream is now the future site of a water monitoring lab. The front lawn? Already bulldozed. The kitchen? Gone. The master bath with the bidet she bragged about on Facebook? Gutted and piped. The only thing left untouched is the foundation, and even that's about to be submerged under a new cistern built for the next generation of water preservation tech. I didn't do it for revenge. Not entirely. I did it because some people forget what power actually looks like. Karen thought it was about fines and fear, about clipboards and code violations, about inventing authority where none exists. But real power, quiet power, is about leverage, systems, patience, precision, and when the time comes, knowing exactly how to use it. So now, every time the residents of Pine Ridge Estates turn on a faucet, they see a new sign installed by the county. Water supplied courtesy of the Maddox Environmental Trust. Please use responsibly. And every time they drive past the gleaming new treatment facility where Karen's house used to stand, they see another sign. Facility funded by civil restitution from HOA harassment litigation. And me? I sit on my dock, sipping coffee, watching the sun reflect off a lake that still belongs to me and always will. The war is over. Karen lost. And now, the water remembers.